We need our artists to transform the world and hand it back to us in ways that we can see it new. And Aurora Levins Morales is one of those artists. She is an elder, a Puerto Rican Jewish writer and artist and historian and activist. And she has taken in what's happening in the Middle East and gifted us with this poem called Summons. I'm going to open with it here, and I'll refer to it throughout the sermon, and I'll read parts of it over and over again. Last night I dreamed 10,000 grandmothers from the 1,200 corners of the earth walked out into the gap, one breath deep between the bullet and the flesh, between the bomb and the family. 10,000 grandmothers. They told me, we cannot wait for governments. There are no peacekeepers boarding planes. There are no leaders who are daring to say every life is precious, so it will have to be us. They said, we will cup our hands around each heart. We will sing the earth's song, the song of water, a song so beautiful that vengeance will turn to weeping, so beautiful that the mourners will embrace each other, so beautiful that grief will replace every impulse toward harm. 10,000 is not enough, they say, so we have sent this dream like a flock of doves into the sleep of the world. Wake up. Put on your shoes. You who are hearing this, I am bringing bandages and a bag of scented guavas from my trees. I think I remember the tune. Meet me at the corner. Let's go. This past summer, I did 3 months of clinical pastoral education up at Beverly Hospital on the North Shore, learning how to be a chaplain, working with anybody who was hospitalized. And during that time, it became really painfully clear to me that wanting to know that I felt like I knew what I was doing, which I decidedly not know what I was doing, was a continuing significant issue for me. And thank God I was quickly reminded once again, over and over, that my expertise is never the most important thing in the room. The most important thing in the room is my humanity. So I can be a pretty slow learner. Reflecting back, I can see how many opportunities life has handed me to study this issue of somehow I need to feel like I know what I'm doing. Starting way back in the 1980s, I'm in my 20s, I was working in a brand new alternative school in Oregon. I had worked to help start it, and the students were free to engage with whatever interested them. And those of us who were on staff, so I was a staff there, were there to support them. And we were told before we opened to be ready for anything, that young people actually are much more interested in profound questions than most educational models would assume. And I was like, this is right up my alley, because I fancied myself a type of person with some depth. So the first week the school is open, 3 little 4-year-olds approach me, and they're each clutching a blank piece of paper and a crayon. And they're very serious. Like they're moving uncharacteristically slowly. And these 3 4-year-olds look up at me, and one of them says, "We want to study love." And the others nod, solemn. Okay. there it was, day 2, I'm exposed. I do not know what I'm doing. I sat down at a nearby table, and the kids put their papers down in front of me, and they looked at me. Love, I said, trying to look pensive. I'm stalling for time. My mind is like, what do you say to a 4-year-old about love? I got nothing. I was 25. Panic is starting to rise. I can feel my face getting hot. The tension around here. I'm supposed to know something. I'm supposed to know something to say and know something to do. And I must have looked pretty panicky because, thank God, a very wonderful and older and infinitely wiser staff member with 2 kids of her own came over, and I made significant eye contact with her and encouraged the children to repeat their wonderful inquiry. And they said it just the same. We want to study love. So Raina considered them, and she said, would you like to learn how to write the word love? And they smiled and nodded and quickly scooted their papers from where I sat over to Raina so she could write L-O-V-E on their papers. And they're looking back at me like with clear skepticism, like, who is this tall staff member who does not know how to spell love? This story came to me while I was at Beverly Hospital doing this clinical pastoral education and wrestling with, I need to know more than I do about Christian prayer and all the things. I sat there expecting those kids to ask profound questions, so I knew that's what they were doing. It was so obvious that it filled my entire mind and left no room for what they were actually asking. So as I told you during our very wet blessing, on Friday I will travel to Oswiecim, Poland for my annual Bearing Witness retreat at Auschwitz-Birkenau. The Zen Peacemakers International were founded by Roshi Bernie Glassman, and they've organized this retreat for more than 25 years. The 3 tenets that are the central instruction of the retreat are not knowing, bearing witness, and loving action. Every year I have a personal focus, and this year the focus is not knowing. I've been listening to Aaliyah talk this month in church about listening, and this too is a kind of listening. Not knowing, a listening with fresh, wide open mind to experience what's actually happening in the present moment. And as I really felt this Morales poem that I just read, I could hear the 3 tenets actually at work in this poem. She starts with the not knowing. She says, this emerged from a dream. She moved out into the gap, 1 breath deep. So we start with not knowing, and then we bear witness to what's actually there. In her piece, she names the bullet and the flesh, the bomb and the family, and the no peacekeepers boarding planes, and the no leaders who dare to say every life is precious. And if we stay with not knowing and bearing witness to reality, what emerges is loving action, whatever's the next right thing to do. And it may just be going back to loving, to bearing witness and not knowing. For Morales, she names it, we will cup our hands around each heart. We will sing a song so beautiful that vengeance will turn to weeping, that mourners will embrace, and grief replace every impulse toward harm. She goes on with the loving action. Wake up, put on your shoes. I'm bringing bandages and a bag of scented guavas. Meet me at the corner. Let's go. So not knowing is moving back from what we think we know about ourselves, moving back from what we think we know about the world around us, moving back from what we think we know about what's happening, and instead opening to the vast realm of possibility. We don't actually know what's going to happen next. We don't actually know what any person is thinking or feeling, at least not completely, and maybe hardly at all. Not knowing is a practice that comes out of non-dualistic or non-binary thinking. So it's the kind of thing that's helpful with bigger picture matters, like love and God and grace, like fear and pain and death. There's a lot that we have in our lives that relies on dualistic binary thinking, which labels things as this or that, true or false, good or bad. And with some things, that's really, really important. Right? Knowing things, clear-headed thinking are important for engineers building bridges. They're responsible for little tiny advances like, science and industry and medicine. Knowing is necessary and important as far as it goes. It's just that it can't quite go far enough. And when we impose it on matters that are not knowable, it becomes sticky. When we're dealing with things that aren't knowable and we cling to the knowing, that clinging just gets in the way. I had a professor in my first graduate degree who was teaching us differential diagnosis from the DSM-4, or whatever the number was then. And at the same time, she said, the most important thing I can teach you is to remember that you don't know. Aaliyah told me she had a meditation teacher who said that his new mantra was, "What is this? I don't know." And she said she was so tired and so pissed off in the class and hated the whole thing. And yet, that phrase is the only thing that stayed with her from meditation 30 years later. You don't have to be happy about being there. So not knowing is hard. It's a practice. It's a major exercise in letting go of tiny little things like fear, like defensiveness, like, our comfort zone. And it's worth it to practice there in that field. I put together some examples of situations I've found it helpful to practice not knowing. So when I'm caught in anxiety about the future, or I'm upset about something that's gone wrong, like in our story today, right? Maybe we don't know. Not knowing can be helpful. It can be helpful when I'm snagged by expectations that a thing is supposed to be a certain way because someone said it was supposed to be that way, or because it was last time, or because that's what's comfortable for me, because that's what I want. Recently, I've listened to Aaliyah talking to you about the idea of not having opinions. Right, trying to talk us into letting go of opinions. Now, not knowing can actually help with that too. It can help us to hold like a healthy skepticism, a healthy uncertainty about our own positions and opinions, and even about our principles and values, which can help us hold a fierce humility. So this isn't about saying, hey, I don't know, so I'm off the hook. This is about committing to examining and re-examining our actions and assumptions. And for me, I think probably the hardest and most important time to remember not knowing is when I am blazingly sure that I am on the side of righteousness. When I am sure that my position is a moral and a just one. I think we all know that there are people who are equally sure of their position in the Middle East on all the sides. Nadia Bolz-Weber put it like this. She's a Lutheran minister and public theologian. She writes, maybe, we are all at much higher risk of harming ourselves and other people when we're certain that we're acting out of our virtues than we ever are when we actually know we're acting out of our vices. The opposite of fundamentalism is humility. Humility is the only spiritually reliable place to land. And so rarely the first place I go. So not knowing is also helpful when you're creating something new. It's one of the ways I'm approaching this bridging ministry project I'm working on here this year. Trying to create something new means my first step is to not know what I'm doing. So I'm listening deeply. I'm asking others to listen with me. And trying to proceed with discernment that's informed by not knowing. I'm exploring sort of what forms ministries that build bridges between congregation and community might take. And there's lots of ideas getting generated, and I have no idea how it will unfold. But like all of us, I have to make decisions and take actions. So I'll make my best call based on whatever I know at the time that I make it. And then the important part comes, right after the decision, which is to return to the not knowing. Without that piece, there's this tendency to clamp down on decisions we made. Well, that's what I decided. And then we close ourselves off to new information. We take away the possibility of changing our mind, of reevaluating and going back again, trying something else, of knowing what's actually happening and knowing that you don't know. You didn't know ahead of time. So when you come back to the not knowing, it opens back up humility. Because I know that how many of my best calls in the moment don't really work out. Some of them do. If I can go back to, I don't know how that's going to work, it frees me up to be more creative. It actually frees me up to take more risks. And I can trust that I'll adapt to whatever I encounter. And the last one I'll talk about is that not knowing can be really tender. And I love that. So if you want to, try this with me now, or you can do it later if you want. Think of something that you've been wanting to be better at. So this can be personal or more collective, but something in the realm of how do I heal my relationship with that person, or how do I love this person better, or how do I help heal racism in our country? How do we heal racism in our community? Just take a moment to find a question for you right now. Maybe lots of ideas show up for you in response to the question. And if so, just note now is not the time for the ideas. So we're going to take a breath and momentarily let them go. And then I'll invite us to say to ourselves, humbly and with really deep compassion, I don't know. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to love that person better. And then notice what we're feeling. Notice what's there. For me, it's concern and sadness and grief. And there's also the awareness that not knowing includes, I love. That not knowing includes, I want to help. That includes, I ache for us. I ache for our pain. I ache for my pain. So this can kind of crack open challenging and difficult feelings. If we can let those move through, on their way through, they can open us. They can inform us. They can connect us. They can humble us. And they can motivate us. It can be hard. And a lot of great stuff, I think, is waiting for us just behind a sticky clump of not knowing. Just behind a sticky clump of discomfort and awkwardness and uncertainty. So I'll go back to Morales to close. Out into the gap, one breath at a time. We'll cup our hands around each heart. And we will sing a song so beautiful that vengeance will turn to weeping. Mourners will embrace, and grief will replace every impulse toward harm. I'm bringing bandages and a bag of scented guavas. I think I remember the tune. Meet me at the corner. Let's go.